let's say for the average person who's listening to this, they just want to have a relatively good set of standards for themselves. They want to look after themselves. They want to train 5 days a week, maybe enjoy a little bit of rest on the weekend or a rest day during the week when they're busy and work and life is getting a little bit too much. But they ultimately want to be able to move their body and maybe go for a 5K on the weekend with friends or during the week. They want to go to a run club to be social for 5Ks. They want to lift some weights so they're strong and they're functional. And ultimately, their goal is to be able to enjoy life in a healthy body and look pretty good too. Like for men and women who have that kind of vision for themselves, should their training look much different?
In a word, no. No. What your training should look like will be dependent upon a lot of subjective factors. That being what you like, what you dislike, what you adhere to, what you don't, what through trial and error has been proven to be more or less effective for you for a number of the reasons that I just mentioned, adherence and whatnot. But ultimately, there is almost an endless array of ways in which a strength, hypertrophy, conditioning, or fat loss approach, or any sort of concurrent concoction of those, whatever your goals may be, whatever result you want to achieve, there's an endless array of ways in which a program can be put together, a way in which you apply yourself can be put together in order to achieve that, right? There isn't one set strength program or one approach to building muscle, and there are certainly some must-haves in respect to intensity, in respect to biasing more volume if you want to build muscle, or a little bit less volume if you want to build strength, because volume and load are inversely correlated, which is why a power lifter who is intently focused on lifting sort of maximal loads will do a lot less volume because they're lifting a lot more load than someone who's a bodybuilder, because they want more volume. They're not worried about the load so much. The load is simply just a means to make shit more difficult to accumulate stress to build muscle. Right? So we've got opposite ends of the spectrum there, but they're all spending time in the same space, applying themselves with what you'd argue to be equal intensity. They're making shit fucking hard, so it's effective. And whether their diet is a deficit or maintenance or surplus, one of the three, it's going to help determine whether that person is intending to lose weight, sort of maintain the weight in which they are, or gain weight. They want to build some more muscle mass and do so, with intent. Whether someone's male or female really doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter. Now, when we talk about the nitty-gritty and the specificity of male to female programming variations, women typically can endure greater training volumes, right? Why? There's probably reasons as to why. I can hypothesize is that men typically tend to have a harder time gauging, this is just my own personal experience with myself and training men, have a harder time gauging an appropriate level of intensity that isn't quite maxing out, right? Women will have an ability to go hard, know that they are not trying to kill themselves on this given set. They can rest a couple of minutes, repeat an equivalent level of intensity in the next set. Whereas guys will tend to have a default setting of, I'm going to give it everything that I've got. Once someone becomes a little bit trained, right? Maybe not from the get-go. Certainly not something I recommend either. Excuse me. Go hard as nails on whatever set they're doing and kind of cook themselves, and then they'll do it again and do it again. But, there is only so much in the tank after those first efforts were so maxed out, right? And so you see this decline in output throughout, say, a given session, right? And so the total volume which a lot of guys can get through typically isn't quite as consistently high as women. But in a general sense, without creating too much confusion, the overall approach should be very much a trial and error, fuck around and find out standpoint, right? Because we want to train, you talk about 5 days a week, anywhere 3, 4, 5, 6 days a week, for instance. You talk about the run and stuff and everything as well. You want to train as often, it should be a healthy relationship, right? Train as often as you enjoy exercising. The more often you train, the less likely you can train as intensely because you don't have as much time to recover. If that's what you like to do because you like a higher training volume, because maybe there's a social aspect to your exercise routine, you're training with friends, you're running with friends, etc. And so you're biasing, it's like, what do you value? You're biasing a greater training frequency and sacrificing the top end intensity, the difficulty, the loads of what you're doing, because what you value more is the frequency because of social aspects, as an example. And it might align with your goals a bit more. Whereas if you are someone who is focused on building maximal strength, whether male or female, well, it stands to reason you don't have the capacity to train as frequently, because what you value is higher loads. Well, with higher loads mean less volume, but also means less frequency, because you need to bias recovery more, because per effort, per session, per exercise, per repetition, shit is far more intense, far more demanding on your structures, on your nervous system. And so demands upon recovery, in order for those intensities to maintain a consistent high when you expose yourself to them, we need to prioritize recovery to balance out the intensity. Right? But that's more goal specific than it is male or female specific, right? Which is why I like to work with people more so on an individual basis, and at least educate people the very best I can to understand that there is essentially no wrong way to go about things, right? If you're training and having fun and seeing progress, happy days. But it's also really important to define your goals, because if you haven't defined your goals, your why, what they represent, etc., then it's going to be a difficult time to, stick to what your goals are, because you don't have enough of an incentivization in order to do it when you don't really want to do it, which is a lot of the time. And you could be spending a lot of time and effort over days, weeks, months, and even years thinking that you are putting in the work to achieve a particular outcome, but the actions that you're taking, the program design, etc., don't exactly align with that, right? That was me for a long time, right? I trained with some very inefficient methods based on what I thought I needed to do to achieve the goals I wanted to achieve. It's only in retrospect that I was like, oh, okay, that was pretty inefficient, right? So that's why education, that's why, again, why I coach the way I do, why I speak the way I do, as a means to try to influence people to be as thoughtful as possible towards their goals, because it's very easy to be quite passive and just go through the motions and rely upon, oh yeah, I can lift weights and this is difficult in the moment. Yeah, it is, but have you adapted to that level of difficulty? Because you probably have. And we need to keep continuing to make shit more difficult, not tremendously so, but just a little bit more difficult than it was, in the past, because your body's adapted to it, right? So it's just tightening the screws. It's not accepting good enough for good enough, because that was okay when you first started, but if that's the standard by which you set, well, that's the extent to which you can expect to progress. Good enough.
Incredibly valuable information there. I think equally refreshing for people to hear that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to fitness and health, that it can be flexible, that you do have autonomy over structuring a specific plan to fit also your life needs, which I think a lot of people don't feel positive about. They feel like that fitness is this, oh man, it's just going to suck. And it has to suck if I want it to be valuable, which is not necessarily the case.